Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Noel and I review and unbox subscription boxes here on my channel, and today I have another book box that's been sent to me for review to share with all of you. This one is by Down the Rabbit Hole Book Box, which specializes in darker reads. So we will get titles in the genres of thriller, mystery, horror, always darker reads that do not necessarily have a happy ending, but they're always compelling. They always definitely keep me wrapped. Another thing that helps with the reading process with these boxes is, in addition to the book, you also receive gifts. So as you're reading, you'll come across a little sticky note that tells you to open the corresponding gift that helps to bring the story to life. Luckily for us, it is not usually a literal item from the book's pages, because sometimes that might be a little bit gruesome or haunting. Usually they're just nice lifestyle items that you can use in your daily life. This box is $49.99 per month. That does include domestic shipping, and usually I would say there's anywhere from 4 to 5 gifts, sometimes a little bit more. Sometimes there's fun little extras like playlists or bookmarks or tea to drink along with your read, something to keep you some company. But it is always definitely an interesting box to receive. This time around, this is actually the December 2023 box. This is the most recent one that I have on hand. It was kind of a classic in a weird way. It was released by a classic horror writer, Mr. Stephen King. So this was actually Misery. So we got this a nice paperback. Now most people I think know Misery from the movie with I think it was James Caan and Kathy Bates. I feel like she made that character so popular. I'm not usually a horror person, definitely not in terms of movies, so I knew the basic premise of it but always steered clear of watching the film. I think maybe now I could watch it, but I was intrigued to read it because I know that Stephen King, yes, he has some really dark subject matter, but it's very much like psychological in terms of the horror, as well as some, you know, some bloody moments as well. But he's just a really fantastic writer. So this was a really, really good one, I thought, and it came along with 4 different gifts. In addition to our book, of course, we got our other items. This time around, they all came in little Down the Rabbit Hole book boxes inside. We also get our little pamphlet. So the theme for each box is kind of a hint as to the upcoming title, and she'll also post upcoming hints as well, but you can always reach out via email and find out what the upcoming title is. So this one was Misery Loves Company, so it was kind of right there in the title. Inside we always get a little information about the author and then maybe some reviews, for example, so I kind of think that's a fun feature. This time around we got a kind of a cool bookmark. It's a reading list that looks like a library card, obviously with like blood spatter on it. So if you're one of those people that has a TBR pile that has a lot of those darker reads, which I do because of this box, it's kind of fun because then it has the title, the date, and then you have a little star rating column so you can rate it and help yourself remember which reads, which is always nice when you're going back and finding authors and be like, did I like that first book by that author that I read? Not just going off of the Goodreads reviews, right? Because everyone's tastes are kind of personal. So I thought this was a kind of a fun bookmark to include. By the way, if you are interested in subscribing or giving this subscription as a gift, I do have a code for you. It's Noel15, and that will save you 15%. But let me go ahead and get into the book. So I will read the sort of blurb on the back for you, and then I will flip to the pages that have the sticky notes, read the passage, and then open the gifts. So most people, I feel like if you were going to read this book, you might have already read it, or you might be like me, where you just have never gotten around to it. So there aren't major spoilers, I don't think, with the passages that we have. So let's see. Best-selling novelist Paul Sheldon, so there's already kind of a meta situation going on, right? Because it's a novelist writing about a novelist. Best-selling novelist Paul Sheldon has finally met his biggest fan. Her name is Annie Wilkes, and she is dismayed to discover Paul's plans to kill off Misery Chastain, the heroine of his beloved series. Annie is more than a rabid reader. She is Paul's nurse, tending his shattered body after an automobile accident. She is also his captor, imprisoning him in her isolated house, where no one knows he is. Annie wants Paul to write his greatest work, just for her. She has a lot of ways to spur him on. One is a needle. Another is an axe. And then there's the blowtorch. Winner of the Bram Stoker Award for Best Novel, a classic film starring Academy Award winner Kathy Bates, and recently adapted for the stage starring Bruce Willis and Laurie Metcalf. Well, not that recently, but I did not know that. Misery is one of King's most brilliant and formatively unnerving books ever. It is. Man, he is so prolific, and this is one of the ones that he is really known for. What I thought, let's see, when is the 1987? So what's kind of interesting, right, is because he is basically being forced to rewrite a novel, another in the series of Misery books, because he killed her off in the last one, and he was not happy with that. So guess what, Paulie boy? You get to write a new one. But so we get, as sort of in his stupor and his daze, we get sections that are from that new novel. So for example, we'll have pages like this that are just the regular novel, the regular type. And then we'll have sections like this with more of a typewriter font to help us know which parts are reality and which parts are part of the story that he's writing. Eventually he winds up writing it in longhand, which is kind of impressive, but it's very interesting. There's definitely some like kind of stream of consciousness. There's definitely a lot of conflation because he's often on drugs for the pain, where he's like conflating Annie with this goddess that's in his story that he's writing, and he kind of becomes this Scheherazade because he knows that she's most likely going to kill him once he's finished rewriting the book. It's very interesting. It's very interesting, and tells you a lot about writers too. I was just going to read this little quote here from Stephen King that's actually from the novel, but you know, maybe it's from actually what he thinks as well. Writers remember everything, especially the hurts. Strip a writer to the buff, point to the scars, and he'll tell you the story of each small one. From the big ones, you get novels. A little talent is a nice thing to have if you want to be a writer, but the only real requirement is the ability to remember the story of every scar. Art consists of the persistence of memory. Man, knowing all those little details and stuff, and that's what really haunts our writer in the story, Paul, because he sees and experiences these things, and then he just keeps experiencing them because he doesn't sort of mentally shut down. He can't push those out of his mind. So our first gift came on page 25. Here's what it looks like when you come across a sticky note. So let me see if I can remember. So yes, she's found him after a car accident. He had just finished his latest book, but it's not in the Misery series, and he was kind of celebrating. So let's see, and she gets him like out of a snowbank essentially. It says, let's see, she turned off then. She just sat there for what might have been 30 seconds. During that time, Paul Sheldon's heart did not seem to beat at all. She roused a little at a time, and suddenly she tittered. "I have such a temper," she said. "I'm sorry," he said out of a dry throat. "You should be." Her face went slack again, and she looked moodily at the wall. He thought she was going to blank out again, but instead she fetched a sigh and lifted her bulk from the bed. "You don't have any need to use such words in the Misery books, because they didn't use such words at all back then. They weren't even invented. Animal times demand animal words, I suppose, but that was a better time. You ought to stick to your Misery stories, Paul. I say that sincerely, as your #1 fan." She went to the door and looked back at him. "I'll put that manuscript book back in your bag and finish Misery's Child. I may go back to the other one later when I'm done." "Don't do that if it makes you mad," he said. He tried to smile. "I'd rather not have you mad. I sort of depend on you, you know." She did not return his smile. "Yes," she said. "You do. You do, don't you, Paul?" She left. So she hasn't at that point realized that he kills off her favorite character. All right, so gift number 1 comes in this big box. We have that sort of refrain of her being his #1 fan to the point of making him her hostage. And we got a nice book bag. So this one is actually a really nice one. It's like a thick canvas, nice long straps. I will say we do get a lot of book bags in different book subscription boxes, and lately there have been a lot of really thin, like almost see-through, like muslin ones, but this one is a really nice thick canvas, so you can kind of see, like you can't really see my hand through it, which I appreciate. Someone who's really good at like doing like hand painting on bags and clothes and stuff could definitely paint this, but I like the simplicity of it. I like that it's not branded by the book company or anything. So I thought that was kind of cool, but this is definitely something that Paul's #1 fan might have. I mean, she's very frugal. She's a ex-nurse, and we find out a little bit more about Annie throughout the novel, of course. All right, let's see. Let's see. I think we have On page 91 is gift number 2. Let's see. Oh, so she has left and he has started to regain his strength, and he's going to look for more pills, I think. This might be the first time that he actually gets up and moves around in a wheelchair that she's gotten for him so that he can get up and write. So here we go. Let's see. It says, at least this doorway was wider. Not much, but enough to make his passage less hair-raising. Paul bumped over the lintel, and then the chair's hard rubber wheels rolled smoothly over the tiles. He smelled something sour that he automatically associated with hospitals. Lysol, maybe. There was no toilet in here, but he had already suspected that. The only flushing sounds came from upstairs, and now that he thought of it, one of those upstairs flushes always followed the use of his bedpan. Here, there was only the tub, the basin, and the linen closet with its doors standing open. He gazed briefly at the neat piles of blue towels and washcloths. He was familiar with both from the sponge baths she had given him, and then turned his attention to the medicine cabinet over the washstand. It was out of reach. No matter how he strained, it was a good 9 inches above the tips of his fingers. He could see this, but reached anyway, unable to believe fate or God or whoever could be so cruel. He looked like an outfielder reaching desperately for a home run ball he had absolutely no chance of catching. So, basically he's in the bathroom and he's looking for the drugs. So, all right, we have, don't worry, it's not drugs. It's not painkillers. Gift number 2, so slightly smaller box. We got, because he is in the bath room and because he's thinking about the sponge baths that she awkwardly gives him, we have 2 bath bombs. We have a spearmint and eucalyptus from a company called Purellis. These are like a good size though, where I feel like you could use them as shower steamers in a little shower steamer tray. Especially when it's spearmint and eucalyptus, because these are nice, strong smelling ones. I'm really glad we got nice bath bombs. Even though I'm not a bath girl, I do sometimes use my bath bombs as shower steamers if they're like a strong spa-ish scent. But I'm glad we didn't get like Lysol or something, or a sponge. I guess we could have gotten a sponge for his sponge baths, but that wouldn't have been as fun. The next one came on page 168. They were pretty well spaced out for the most part. This book was about 350 pages. Let's see. On page 168, I have to try to remember. Oh, so she definitely is very much a fan of the Misery books. In fact, when he first tries to bring that character back to life as he starts to write this new book, The Return of Misery, or Misery Returns, he does it in this very like Deus Ex Machina, super easy way, and she tells him like, it's good, but you can't do that. That's not like within the realm of possibility. That's just way too easy. So she makes him basically start over. And he comes up with another idea, and he hasn't fully fleshed it out, but at one point, because she's reading the drafts, essentially, she suggests that maybe someone had appeared to be dead. Maybe Misery had just appeared to be dead because of a bee sting, because sometimes people can go into kind of a coma from a bee sting. She knows this because she used to be a nurse, and for various other reasons. So at one point, and he was like, that doesn't work because of the way I set it up. Just that would be also too easy, or like too much of a coincidence that this happened to multiple people since it's such a rare phenomenon, you know, and he's figuring out. But at one point, he really starts to live for writing this book, not only because he knows it's prolonging his time there with Annie, but also like it's his only sort of saving grace that's kind of keeping him somewhat sane. So let's see. So he basically calls for her. And he says, she's asking, are you cramping? He says, no, Annie, I'm sorry if I scared you, but you got to help me into the chair. I got it. The dreaded F word was not out before he could help it. He had sworn. I skipped that part. But this time, it didn't seem to matter. She was looking at him respectfully, and with not a little awe. Here was the secular version of the Pentecostal fire burning before her very eyes. Of course, Paul. She got him into the chair as quickly as she could. She began to roll him toward the window, and Paul shook his head impatiently. This won't take long, he said, but it's very important. Is it about the book? It is the book. Be quiet. Don't talk to me. Ignoring the typewriter, he never used the typewriter to make notes. He seized one of the ballpoints and quickly covered a single sheet of paper with a scrawl that probably no one else but him could have read. They were related. It was bees, and it affected them both the same way because they were related. Misery's and Orph. And guess what? The Evelyn Hyde babe was Misery's sister, or maybe half-sister. That would probably work better. Who gets the first hint? Shinny? No, Shinny's a ninny. Mrs. R? She can go see Charles. E.H.'s mommy. And now he was struck by an idea of such intense loveliness in terms of the plot at least that he looked up, mouth open, eyes wide. Paul? Annie asked anxiously. She knew, Paul whispered. Of course she did. At least strongly suspected. So he's writing notes. And he's like figuring out a way to make the bee situation maybe work. And which I thought was very dangerous to like let Annie be part of that, you know, and let her feel like she had given him an answer. So this was kind of fun. We got these two beeswax candles, which kind of represents the two sisters or half sisters, maybe, according to Paul. Little like candles. But they have little bees on them. I will tell you, I think the bees are a little bit creepy because they kind of are that amber color. So I feel like they almost look like, I don't know, they look like some other kind of insect, like a termite or something, because then they have these wings. They're not termite wings, but I usually love all things bee, but I found these a little bit slightly creepy to me just because they look like real insects almost, because they have like the little legs and antennas. What do you guys think? I mean, it's cute, right? And I do like this kind of candle where it's just the wax, the beeswax, but I don't know. I like it better on the yellow than in the pink, but cute. And you guys know I like eating a candle, but it's just like, it kind of looks like a real bug when you like look at the body of it, the abdomen of it. I don't know. I was like, ooh, creepy, but you know, kind of goes with the book. Let's see. And then our final gift came on page 241. Let me see if I can remember this. Okay, so this is in that typewriter font, right? So we are in the world of Misery, and they're like in this jungle essentially, and they're trying to save her. I guess really these gifts could have honestly gone with this section as well. There's lots of mentions of bees throughout, but based on the gift, I'm pretty sure this is where it was supposed to go. So it says, Misery wore not. And it's very interesting because they really put a lot of effort into this edition because his typewriter is an old used typewriter, and eventually it loses keys like the N and the T and eventually the E. And so Annie has to go back and handwrite them in, and they actually did that. So it looks like someone hand wrote in the T's and the ends. So let me see if I can find it for you. Wore not a stitch of clothing. Can you guys see that? So they made it look like someone actually wrote in the T's. Obviously, it's just another font, but it's still pretty cool that they took the time to do that for these sections of the book. Sorry, you guys, you're a little out of focus. There we go. Focus on the Misery. All right, Misery wore not a stitch of clothing, yet Geoffrey thought that even the most prudish church thrice-a-week village biddy could not have faulted her for indecency. The hypothetical old prude might have run screaming from the sight of Misery, but her screams would have been caused by terror and revulsion rather than outraged propriety. Misery wore not a stitch of clothing, but she was far from naked. Oh, goodness, we're still out of focus. Let's see. There's the bee. There's me. There we go. All right. She was dressed in bees. From the tips of her toes to the crown of her chestnut hair, she was dressed in bees. She seemed almost to be wearing some strange nun's habit. Strange because it moved and undulated across the swells of her breasts and hips, even though there was not even a ghost of a breeze. Likewise, her face seemed encased in a wimple of almost Mohammedan modesty. Only her blue eyes peered out of the mask of bees, which crawled sluggishly over her face, hiding mouth and nose and chin and brows. More bees, giant Africa browns, the most poisonous and bad-tempered bees in all the world, crawled back and forth over the Baron's steel bracelets before joining the living gloves on Misery's hands. So really creepy imagery, right? Of her just being covered in bees that can kill her. Like, I was like, oh, good writing, Paul. Good writing, Stephen. All right. So we have our final gift. Got to get to it before well, maybe that was like the lack of focus was to help you guys understand that sort of moving bee shroud she was in. So we got to represent the handcuffs that Misery is shackled in. That's what's keeping her in place. We got some bracelets, which I thought was a good interpretation. So like I said, we didn't get like real handcuffs. We just got two little silver cuffs with a little knot, which I thought was kind of cute. Fun little like bit of costume jewelry. And for me, that's the kind of thing that like makes sense in terms of, you know, It's inspired by that little bit of the book, but not necessarily a literal, you know, literal translation. So those are all the items that we got this time around in what I was really glad that I read this. So I might be more willing to read a few more Stephen King books just because, again, there are a lot about the psychological element, even though there is definitely some violence and gore in there. But he's just such a fantastic writer, and going between these two characters and their thoughts and these two different storylines, I really enjoyed it. So we got our fun bookmark. We got our fun book bag, which good quality on this one. Our 2 bangles, our 2 bee candles, and what was the last thing that, oh, 2 bath bombs. So not too bad. And a good indicator of the kinds of gifts that you might receive in a Down the Rabbit Hole book box, no matter what kind of book you are reading. You guys, let's have a secret password. I know it's coming at the very, very end, but let's make it typewriter in honor of Paul. So when you come across a secret password, you enter it with your contact information in the Google form linked for you in the description box below. You have to be 18 years or older, you have to have a US or Canadian mailing address, and you do have to be subscribed to my channel, not affiliated with YouTube or any of the boxes that I open here on the channel. But today's secret password is typewriter. And then about 5 days into the following month, I'll use a random number picker to select a few winners to receive mystery boxes as my way of saying thank you. So thank you for watching this whole video. I'll see you soon in my next unboxing.